The American Civil War is one of the most pivotal periods in U.S. history, filled with strategic battles, shifting alliances, and moments that altered the course of the nation. But hidden within its chaos, there are some remarkable coincidences that continue to intrigue historians and enthusiasts alike. From chance encounters to unexpected events, these 10 notable coincidences will make you question just how much fate had a hand in shaping the outcome of the war. If you enjoy uncovering the unexpected twists of history, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more fascinating stories from the Old West and beyond. Two for one. Coincidence? Two future presidents in the same Union regiment. Among the numerous Union regiments that fought during the Civil War, only one included two future presidents, Rutherford B. Hayes and William McKinley. Both men served in the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry, a regiment that played a significant role in the war effort. Rutherford Hayes began his military career as an officer in the 23rd Ohio. Over time, he rose to the rank of general, spending much of his service in the western theaters of the war, particularly in Virginia. Despite facing numerous challenges, Hayes endured multiple injuries during the conflict, showcasing his resilience. William McKinley, who was much younger than Hayes, served under him in the same regiment. Hayes quickly recognized McKinley's potential, acknowledging his courage and leadership skills. He promoted McKinley to the position of supply sergeant for his contributions to the regiment's efforts, and later to second lieutenant following his brave actions during the Battle of Antietam. McKinley admired Hayes deeply, both as a leader and as a fellow Ohioan. Their bond extended beyond the battlefield, with McKinley following in Hayes' footsteps into the Ohio governor's office and eventually to the presidency. This shared military experience helped shape their paths toward leadership in the years that followed. Falling sword. Coincidence. Stonewall Jackson's sword falls. On the morning of May 2nd, 1863, as General Stonewall Jackson prepared for battle, an unusual event occurred. His sword, which had been left leaning against a tree, unexpectedly fell to the ground on its own. At first glance, this might seem like a trivial incident. However, in the midst of a war that was filled with superstition and signs, many believed this was more than just a simple accident. At the time, numerous soldiers and officers interpreted such events as omens, often believing that something significant might happen shortly afterward. In Jackson's case, that belief would gain particular weight later that day. During the evening, Jackson was mistakenly shot by his own men, an incident that would ultimately lead to his death. The timing of the falling sword and the later tragedy seemed too connected for some to dismiss as mere coincidence. Confederate General A.L. Long, who was present and recorded the event in his memoirs, helped perpetuate the notion that the falling sword was an ominous sign of Jackson's impending fate. His account, along with the tragic events that followed, contributed to the development of the legend that Jackson's death had been foreshadowed by the inexplicable fall of his sword. This connection between the two events continues to captivate historians and adds to the mystique surrounding Jackson's larger-than-life persona. Hole in the hat. Coincidence. A bullet hole saves John Brown. Gordon, one of the most prominent figures of the post-war South, John Brown Gordon, narrowly avoided death at the Battle of Antietam on September 17, 1862, thanks to a small but significant hole in his hat. During the intense fighting in Maryland, Gordon, a Confederate officer, played a crucial role in defending the center of the rebel line in what became known as the Sunken Lane, or Bloody Lane. This was one of the key positions during the battle, and Gordon was right in the thick of it. Though some of Gordon's personal accounts of the battle may have been embellished over time, the story of his near-death experience remains both dramatic and fascinating. While engaged in combat, Gordon was struck by a bullet to the face. The impact caused him to collapse forward, falling face first into his hat, which was resting on the ground. As he lay there, blood quickly began to pool inside the hat. However, the bullet had made a clean hole through the fabric, allowing the blood to drain out. This seemingly minor detail, an opening in his hat, likely saved Gordon's life. Without it, the blood would have accumulated, potentially suffocating him. Remarkably, Gordon survived his injuries, recovering enough to continue his service in the Confederate Army. His resilience and bravery earned him a promotion to the rank of lieutenant general by the war's conclusion. After the war, Gordon became an influential figure in Georgia, serving as the state's governor and later as a U.S. senator. The remarkable survival of John Brown Gordon is a testament to both his personal fortitude and the strange coincidences that can shape the course of history. His story, including his near-death experience at Antietam, continues to be a subject of discussion in Civil War histories, as well as in his own memoirs. Irish against Irish. Coincidence. Irish soldiers face each other in battle. Civil wars are often defined by their personal nature, where soldiers fight against their own kin and neighbors. This was certainly the case in the American Civil War, which saw brother pitted against brother and even close friends on opposing sides. One of the most emotionally charged episodes of this internal conflict took place during the Battle of Fredericksburg on December 13, 1862. It was a moment that highlighted the deep divisions within the country, and one that still resonates for its humanity. Since the 1840s, Irish immigrants had made their way to the United States in large numbers, seeking better opportunities after the Great Famine devastated their homeland. These immigrants settled in various parts of the country, with some heading north to join the Union cause, and others finding their way to the South. By the time of the Battle of Fredericksburg, this large Irish community had become an important part of both the Union and Confederate forces. As the battle reached its final stages, the Union's Irish Brigade, a regiment entirely composed of Irish immigrants, found itself face-to-face with a Confederate unit made up mostly of Irish soldiers. In this intense clash, Irish men on both sides fought one another, each believing in their respective cause. The fighting was fierce and the outcome was grim. After the battle, the Confederate Irish soldiers, having defeated their Union counterparts, gave a heartfelt and tearful cheer for their fallen brothers in arms, recognizing the bravery of those they had just fought against. This tragic yet powerful moment from Fredericksburg illustrates the complicated emotions that often accompany civil wars, where loyalty to a nation or cause can tear families and communities apart. The connection between these Irish soldiers, who had once shared the same struggles as immigrants, was evident even in the heat of battle. The event is poignantly depicted in the film Gods and Generals, though the film's portrayal may not fully capture the depth of this profound and heartbreaking moment in history. Last words. Coincidence. General Sedgwick's unintentional final words. The story of Major General John Sedgwick's final moments has become one of the most well-known and tragic tales from the Civil War. It has even been mentioned in various lists of famous last words, and for good reason. The incident occurred during the opening stages of the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse in Virginia, which took place from May 8th to May 22nd, 1864. Sedgwick, commander of the Union's 6th Corps, found himself in a situation where his men were taking cover from Confederate sniper fire. As the battle raged around them, Sedgwick attempted to rally his troops, encouraging them to stand firm. Observing that the men were hesitating and ducking to avoid the sniper's bullets, he is famously reported to have said, "They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance." His words, intended to reassure his soldiers and show confidence in their position, were tragically ironic. Moments after uttering these words, a Confederate sniper, who had been lying in wait, managed to take a fatal shot. The bullet struck Sedgwick in the head, killing him instantly. This moment, marked by the general's seemingly misplaced confidence, illustrates the harsh reality of warfare, where fate can be sealed in an instant. Sedgwick, one of the Union's most respected generals, had earned a reputation for his bravery and leadership. His death left a significant void in the Union command, and his final words, often cited as an example of the irony of war, remain a poignant reminder of the unpredictability and suddenness of death in battle. Historians have long reflected on the incident as a striking example of how, even in moments of apparent certainty, the unpredictable nature of warfare can alter the course of events in the blink of an eye. The fact that a simple remark, meant to inspire confidence, turned into a tragic last statement encapsulates the fragility of life during the war. Bad medicine. Coincidence, the fatal effects of Civil War era. Medicine on President Garfield. James Garfield, who had survived the dangers of the Civil War without a scratch, tragically met his end due to the inadequate and unsanitary medical practices of his time. In the aftermath of the Civil War, the medical community had not yet made the crucial connection between cleanliness and the prevention of infection. Surgeons and doctors rarely understood the importance of washing their hands or sterilizing instruments between patients, which was a far cry from today's medical standards. In July 1881, when Garfield was shot by an assassin at a Washington, D.C. train station, the medical response was immediate but deeply flawed. Dr. Willard Bliss, an experienced surgeon who had treated soldiers during the war and was familiar with gunshot wounds, arrived quickly to attend to the president. Unfortunately, Bliss's treatment would contribute to Garfield's deteriorating condition. Instead of using sterilized instruments or ensuring that his hands were clean, Bliss likely used his unwashed fingers to probe the wound in search of the bullet. This lack of hygiene would prove disastrous. The subsequent surgeries and further probing conducted by Dr. Bliss and other medical professionals were similarly performed with unsterilized tools and possibly unwashed hands. While Garfield's initial wound may not have been fatal, the infections caused by the unsanitary practices would prove to be. His body became overwhelmed with sepsis, which ultimately led to his death in September 1881. The massive infection introduced by the doctor's lack of proper medical protocols was far more lethal than the bullet itself. Garfield's death was a tragic turning point for American medicine. The incident highlighted the critical need for sterile procedures, and in its aftermath, there was a significant shift in medical practices. Doctors began to recognize the importance of sterilizing their hands and instruments, a change that would help to revolutionize healthcare in the years to come. The death of President Garfield, though deeply sorrowful, contributed to the eventual modernization of medical care, emphasizing the need for hygiene in preventing infections, a concept that had yet to be fully understood during the Civil War era. Close to home, coincidence. A soldier's return home ends in tragedy near his house. In 1861, Todd Carter, a young man from Franklin, Tennessee, enlisted in the Confederate Army, which would later become part of the Army of Tennessee. After years of service, Carter found himself back in his hometown, where the pivotal Battle of Franklin unfolded on November 30th, 1864. The battle, led by General John Bell Hood, was a fierce Confederate assault against Union forces entrenched in the town. Hood's troops launched a relentless attack, and the fighting grew intense, particularly around key locations like the Carter family's home. As the battle raged outside, the Carter family took refuge in their basement, hoping to stay safe from the violence unfolding above. From their sheltered position, Todd Carter had a poignant view of his home, which had become an emblem of both hope and devastation. Upon spotting his house amidst the chaos, Carter, filled with the anticipation of returning to safety, shouted, "Follow me, boys, I'm almost home." Tragically, his journey would end just short of that moment of safety. As he neared his house, Todd Carter was struck by a fatal wound. He collapsed and succumbed to his injuries 2 days later. The irony and sorrow of his death, occurring so close to the very place he longed to reach, made his story all the more poignant. The Battle of Franklin was particularly devastating for the Confederate forces, who suffered heavy losses. 5 Confederate generals, including the notably named States' Rights Gist, were killed during the engagement, underscoring the ferocity and desperation of the assault. The loss of so many leaders left a deep impact on the Confederate Army and marked a turning point in the war for the South. The story of Todd Carter serves as a reminder of the personal tragedies that occurred amidst the larger historical events of the Civil War. His death, so close to the home he fought to defend, symbolizes the crushing sense of loss experienced by many soldiers during the war. Same place, same manner. Coincidence. Jackson and Longstreet shot in the same place, 1 year apart in a similar manner. The old saying, "friendly fire isn't," rings painfully true in the cases of 2 prominent Confederate generals, Stonewall Jackson and James Longstreet, who were both accidentally wounded in nearly identical circumstances 1 year apart on the same road. In May 1863, after his brilliant flank attack at the Battle of Chancellorsville, General Thomas Stonewall Jackson was riding ahead of his men through the dense and dark woods. The confusion of the night, combined with the difficult, heavily wooded terrain, led to a tragic mistake. Confederate soldiers, unable to distinguish between friend and foe in the low visibility, opened fire on Jackson's group, believing them to be Union cavalry. Jackson was severely wounded in the arm, and the injuries, compounded by the onset of pneumonia, ultimately led to his death just a week later. His passing marked a devastating loss for the Confederate Army, as Jackson had been one of its most revered and successful commanders. 1 year later, in the brutal fighting during the Battle of the Wilderness in 1864, General James Longstreet, a senior commander in the Confederate Army, found himself in a similar situation. Following his own successful attack against the Federal left flank, Longstreet and his staff were riding along the same road, just half a mile east of where Jackson had been wounded the previous year. In the chaos and confusion of the battle, Confederate soldiers again mistook their own officers for the enemy, and they accidentally fired on Longstreet's party. This time, Longstreet was struck by a bullet in the neck. While Jackson's wounds had proven fatal, Longstreet's injuries were not. Though he was seriously hurt, Longstreet survived the attack. His recovery was long, but by November of the same year, he was able to rejoin the Confederate Army and continue his service, albeit with diminished physical abilities. Longstreet's survival and Jackson's death highlight the unpredictable and often cruel nature of war, where fate can be determined by mere seconds and small errors in identification. Both incidents are remembered for their tragic irony. The fact that 2 of the most important generals in the Confederate Army, both known for their strategic brilliance, would suffer nearly identical fates, separated by only 1 year and an almost identical sequence of events. These accidents also serve to underscore the confusion and chaos that permeated the battles of the Civil War, where even the most experienced officers could become victims of friendly fire. Battle rouser. Coincidence. Wherever President Davis went, a battle seemed to follow. One of the most curious and seemingly improbable coincidences of the Civil War occurred during President Jefferson Davis's tour of the Confederate States in late 1862. As he visited various military commands across the South, significant battles broke out shortly after he departed each location. This string of events has intrigued historians, as it appeared that the president's movements were somehow linked to major engagements between Union and Confederate forces. During his travels in late November and early December 1862, Davis visited several key areas in the Confederacy, including Fredericksburg, Virginia, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Vicksburg, Mississippi. His tour, which was aimed at inspecting the Confederate forces and boosting morale, was soon followed by intense military clashes at each of these locations. At Fredericksburg, after Davis left the area, Union forces clashed with Confederate defenders on December 13, 1862. This battle, which resulted in heavy casualties on both sides, is often remembered for the Union's failed attempts to dislodge the Confederates entrenched on the heights above the town. Just days after Davis's visit to Murfreesboro, the Battle of Stones River, also known as the Battle of Murfreesboro, took place from December 31, 1862 to January 2, 1863. This battle was significant in the Western theater of the war, with the Union Army of the Cumberland under Major General William Rosecrans engaging the Confederate Army of Tennessee. Another battle, the Battle of Chickasaw Bluffs, occurred near Vicksburg on December 28, 1862, shortly after Davis had been in the area. This series of events led some to speculate about the strange timing of these battles. While there is no evidence to suggest that Davis's presence directly influenced the timing of these confrontations, it remains an eerie coincidence that battles erupted almost immediately after his visits. It raises questions about the nature of leadership and how significant figures in wartime might be associated with the timing of military engagements, whether through direct involvement or simply through the flow of events. The incidents surrounding Davis's tour also reflect the broader context of the war in 1862, a year marked by critical engagements and shifting momentum. While Davis's visits were a symbolic gesture of leadership, they seemed to coincide with some of the war's most intense and pivotal battles. This sequence serves as a reminder of the unpredictable and often uncanny nature of war, where even the most planned and controlled actions can be followed by events beyond anyone's control. Historian Shelby Foote, in his book Fredericksburg to Meridian, documents these events and provides insight into how the timing of these battles shaped the trajectory of the war in the winter of 1862 to 63. Like father, like son. Coincidence. A father's threat, a son's tragedy. Junius Booth in his remarkable legacy. In an unusual and long-debated historical twist, it was revealed that the infamous actor Junius Booth, the father of John Wilkes Booth, had once threatened to kill a U.S. president, though not the one most people would associate with his son's notorious act. In 1835, Junius Booth sent a death threat to President Andrew Jackson, requesting that he pardon two men accused of piracy. This letter, which contained a chilling promise to cut Jackson's throat, was never acted upon, and the threat was dismissed by Jackson's clerks as the ramblings of an eccentric. At the time Booth's letter was filed away alongside other similar messages, dismissed as nothing more than an outburst from a frustrated individual. For over a century and a half, historians questioned whether the letter had genuinely been penned by Junius Booth, or if it was just the work of someone using his name. The controversy surrounding its authenticity persisted, leaving it as a curiosity in the historical record. However, in January 2009, The director of the Andrew Jackson Papers Project at the University of Tennessee confirmed that extensive research and archival work had conclusively established that Junius Booth was indeed the author of the threatening letter. This revelation added another layer to the legacy of the Booth family, whose name would become infamous for the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln, committed by Junius's son, John Wilkes Booth. The content of the letter itself was unremarkable by the standards of death threats, yet it gained an ironic significance in light of history's unfolding events. At the time, it was likely dismissed as the rantings of an angry and frustrated individual, one of many such letters Jackson would have received during his contentious presidency. Had it not been for the actions of Junius Booth's son, John Wilkes, who would later follow through on a much more notorious threat against a president, this letter might have faded into obscurity as just another example of the turbulent political climate of the era. In retrospect, the connection between father and son reveals a strange and almost poetic symmetry. While Junius Booth threatened violence against a president, it was his son who ultimately carried out such an act, albeit on a far grander and more tragic scale. John Wilkes Booth's assassination of Abraham Lincoln in 1865 forever cemented the Booth family's name in the annals of American history, and the earlier actions of his father Junius only served to deepen the sense of eerie continuity in their legacy. As we've seen, the American Civil War was filled with remarkable and often eerie coincidences that shaped the course of history. From the strange timing of key events to the uncanny connections between individuals, these moments highlight how fate seemed to intertwine with the fabric of war. Whether it's a general's last words or the unexpected outcomes of pivotal battles, the legacy of these coincidences continues to captivate our imagination. If you enjoyed exploring these fascinating historical moments, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more intriguing facts and stories from the American Civil War and the Old West. Stay tuned for more incredible tales that reveal the deeper connections in America's past. Trust us, you won't want to miss what's coming next.